And at the end of the previous lesson, we had a discussion to do with the causes, the asbab, the causes, the ways and the means. And we mentioned how everything in Allah's creation is by way of the causes, the asbab, right? So water, for example, is a cause of life, and water is a cause of quenching thirst, right? And the sun is a cause of many different things, right? And so the whole of creation is just a very complex, intertwined, system of causes and effects that Allah Azza wa Jal has created. He has put them together. He has arranged them to work together for wisdoms and objectives, that he has. And so these causes, when we speak of these causes, then we take a correct approach. We take a correct approach as it relates to the causes, right? So we do not negate the fact that there are causes in Allah's creation, right? So we don't negate the fact that Allah does things by way of His causes, right? So we believe, for example, that water is a source of life, and Allah made it as such. And we can ascribe that property to water, right? Because Allah put that property in water, right? There are some people who deny that there are any causes and effects, right? So some people say, for example, like the Ash'aris and people like that, who deviated on this topic, they say that if I drink a glass of water and my thirst is quenched, it wasn't that the water has a property that quenches my thirst. It's that Allah created the quenching of thirst to coincide with me drinking the water. Do you understand? Right? It's not the water that's causing it. Similarly, if I put my hand in the fire and my hand got burnt, it wasn't the fire that burnt my hand, but the burning was created separately by Allah Azza wa Jal there and then to coincide with the fire. Right? So this is a view held by some Muslim sects like the Ash'aris, and this is false. Right? It opposes reality. We can't deny causes and their effects. Otherwise we can't do science. We can't investigate the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? And we can't derive, we can't address our beneficial interests by investigating the creation of Allah and looking at causes and their effects and developing, knowledge in things like agriculture and industry and technology and things of that nature. We can't do that if we deny that there are causes and effects that Allah has created and tied together and put them in His creation. We can't do that, right? So we are not at that extreme of rejection. Nor are we on the other side. The other side now, we have people like the philosophers, the naturalist philosophers, or like the atheists and materialists of today. And they go to the other side and they basically say that everything happens because of the properties of things. Right? So for example, the thirst is quenched because of the property of the water. But that's not strictly true. That's not true. Because, as we mentioned, every cause which exists in creation also relies on other causes without which it cannot occur. Right? So, in example of the fire, right? The fire obviously needs oxygen, it needs fuel to burn, the fire needs other things as well, right? So this means that it's not that the actual property of the thing in and of itself is able to produce the effect. Rather, it is because Allah has put that property in that thing, and that property of that thing also requires other causes without which it can't happen. Right? Right? So on this side, there are some people like the atheist materialists who are basically, they are attributing all of the effects to the actual properties of things. And that's also not correct. Right? Whereas what we say as Muslims upon the sound middle path is that we say that Allah Azza wa Jal put causes and their effects in creation. He tied the two things together, right? And yes, there are properties of things. There are properties of chemicals. There are properties of substances like water, for example, or oil. There are properties of chemicals, like I said, like you can take a pill and it will remove your pain because the molecule has, particular properties. So we accept and affirm the properties in things. But we say that they only take their effect by the permission of Allah Azza wa Jal, because there are also other causes, there are other conditions that also have to be present, which Allah has also created for that thing to have its effect, right? So we are not on this extreme of negation of the causes, nor are we on the other extreme of, claiming that it is the properties of things in themselves that can create the effects, right? So for example, plants, for example, you have a seed, right? If I put the seed on the windowsill, is that seed going to turn into a plant? Of course it's not. The seed, although it has properties, those properties in themselves will not make it turn into a plant and then produce fruits, right? It needs water. But then a seed and a water is still not enough. It needs soil. And then a seed and water and soil is still not enough. It needs the sun, right? So here you can see that the sun has the property of being a life-giving force, but on its own, it can't do that. And the same with the soil, same with the water, same with the seed, right? So who is the one who put all these things together? It is Allah Azza wa Jal, right? He put properties in things, of course, we accept that. But the properties in and of themselves are not in and of themselves the producers of the effects, if you know what I mean. Right? So this is something that we discussed at the end of the previous lesson, and it is something that is very, very important to understand, because it affects a lot of things. It affects a lot of things. And one of the things to which it can be applied to is the issue of contagion, or what is called infectious disease, according to the people of disbelief. And so we discussed this also, we illustrated that at the end of the previous lesson as well. So moving on from that then, so we are discussing, moving on from this, we are discussing the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator of all causes and their effects. And that there is nothing within creation that is free of need and free of dependence upon other than it. Right? Everything besides Allah Azza wa Jal is in need and is dependent and cannot subsist by itself. It needs other causes, it needs other things. And the only one who is free of all need and free of all want is Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this shows, that obviously He has the right to be worshipped, and nothing else has the right to be worshipped by way of this fact. And so since that is the case, then Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Ghani. This is one of His names. He is free of all need. Right? And so this whole discussion is in the context of Islam being the true religion. So continuing from where we left off, Then Shaykh al-Islam, so today's lesson starts from this point. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, وَهُوَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَحْدَهُ الْغَنِي عَنْ كُلِّ مَا سِوَاهُ لَيْسَ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ يُعَاوِنُهُ وَلَا ضِدٌّ يُنَاوِئُهُ وَيُعَارِضُهُ. So he says, he, meaning Allah, the sublime, he alone is al-Ghani. He is the only one who is free of all need and from everything that is besides him. And he has no partner, he's got no partner that aids him, nor does he have any adversary, any opposite or adversary that contends with him or that opposes with him. No such thing exists for him. He neither has a helper that aids him in what he does, nor does he have any adversary that can contend and with him. Allah Ta'ala, Allah the Most High, he said, that he mentions a verse as evidence. قُلْ أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِنْ أَرَادَنِيَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ هَلْ هُنَّ كَاشِفَاتُ ضُرِّهِ أَوْ أَرَادَنِي بِرَحْمَةٍ هَلْ هُنَّ مُمْسِكَاتُ رَحْمَتِهِ قُلْ حَسْبِيَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ يَتَوَكَّلُ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. So he mentioned a verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Zumar, Surah 39, verse 38. Say, do you see that which you call upon besides Allah? Look at the things you are invoking and you are calling upon as gods that you worship besides Allah. Tell me, if Allah wanted some harm for me, for some harm to come to me, would they be able to remove that harm? Or if he wanted some mercy for me, if he wanted to show mercy to me, would they be able to prevent his mercy from reaching me? Say, sufficient for me is Allah, upon him should those who place their trust. Right. So the meaning of this verse here is that benefit and harm is completely in the hand, in the control of Allah Azza wa Jal. And no one else can come and intervene and either prevent a harm or prevent a benefit or prevent any mercy. So there is no one to contend with Allah, to compete with Allah in His creation, nor is there anyone to actually help Him and aid Him in His creation. He's not in need of any helpers, right? So, and then also he mentions another verse, وَقَالَ تَعَالَى, the Exalted, he said, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ فَلَا كَاشِفَ لَهُ إِلَّا هُ فَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ بِخَيْرٍ فَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So, if Allah withholds, if someone wants to, if Allah wants to afflict you with harm, then there is no one that can remove it. And if He wants to afflict you, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ بِخَيْرٍ فَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. If He wants to afflict you with goodness, then He has power over all things. So far then, this indicates that Allah Azza wa Jal is in complete control over the disposal of all of the affairs. There are no interveners, there are no contenders, there are no aiders, there are no helpers, right? He is Al-Ghani, He is free of all need. And as for everything else besides Him, then whether everything else besides Him needs other things besides themselves, right? Why? Because of the way Allah created His creation. It is an intertwined, complex set of causes and their effects, right? And everything needs something else. The animals need herbage, right? The herbage itself, it needs soil, water, rain, right? And so everything else, there's nothing that you can point to except that it needs something else, except for Allah Azza wa Jal. Then Ibn Taymiyyah moves on to Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he mentions numerous verses about Ibrahim alayhi salam, and his argument with his people to illustrate the aspect of Tawheed and to illustrate this whole issue of the causes and their effects, and how everything and anything in the creation is a creature, is dependent, is needy, and can never ever be worthy of worship. And this is illustrated in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, which Ibn Taymiyyah then, he goes on to allude to and to mention. So he says, وَقَالَ تَعَالَى عَنِ الْخَلِيلِ